Now, from Washington, D.C., Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome to the World Over Live. Happy New Year to all of you in the United States and internationally. We're so glad to be back with you in 2013. The war in Washington over the so-called fiscal cliff was temporarily resolved this week by a piece of bipartisan legislation that raises taxes on most Americans. Congressman Tim HUELSKAMP of Kansas, a former member of the House Budget Committee, is here to discuss the deal and what it could mean for the national and global economy. And later, the ongoing battle for religious liberty in the United States. Several federal courts have weighed in. Kyle Duncan, the general counsel for the Becket Fund for Religious Liberty, returns to update us on the court battle over the HHS mandate, where it stands and what it means to you. And finally, who were the most influential Catholics of 2012? I'll tell you my picks for the honor, and I'd love to hear your choices. You can go to twitter.com/Raymond Arroyo or to my Facebook page to offer your suggestions. As always, I want you to be part of the program, so get your calls in now. The number, 1-800-221-9460 in the U.S. and internationally 205-271-2980. Or drop us an email at worldover@ewtn.com. Let's get things started. Here's the brief news from the world over this week. There were new rounds of attacks on Christians during the Christmas holidays. In Nigeria, more than 40 were killed in 4 church attacks since December 25th. Terrorist group Boko Haram is once again suspected. The jihadist claimed responsibility for similar Christmas attacks in 2010 and 2011, which killed more than 50. Meanwhile, Nigeria's military on Tuesday killed 18 members of Boko Haram during a gun battle near the borders of Niger and Chad. The country's military task force on terrorism issued a statement condemning Boko Haram for its incessant, callous, brutal, barbaric, and impious killings. The Pope used his Christmas address to pray for peace in Nigeria and also condemned the, quote, savage acts of terrorism which continue there. And in Libya, on Sunday, a building belonging to the Egyptian Coptic Church was bombed, killing 2 people and wounding 2 others. The victims were preparing for a New Year's Eve Mass. It is the first attack on a Christian target in Libya since the ousting of strongman Muammar Gaddafi. Here in the United States, the legal battle over the federal government's contraception mandate is already making news in the new year. A federal district court judge has halted enforcement of the Health and Human Services mandate for Domino's Farms, a Michigan company owned by Domino's Pizza founder Tom Monahan. Federal District Judge Lawrence Zatkoff ruled that the mandate substantially burdens Monahan's exercise of religion. And the government has failed to meet the constitutional standard, mainly that the mandate is, quote, narrowly tailored to serve a compelling interest, end quote. The ruling comes a week after Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor refused to block enforcement of the mandate in another suit filed by Hobby Lobby, an arts and crafts retail chain. The family-owned company does not object to contraception, but the owner's deeply held religious convictions prohibit them from providing or paying for the abortion-inducing drugs as required by the mandate. Hobby Lobby can continue its battle in the lower courts, but as of January 1st, the company is accruing fines of $1.3 million per day. Domino's Farms and Hobby Lobby are 2 of more than 50 entities fighting the HHS mandate in court. More on this later in the show. Meanwhile, the bishops of the U.S. are launching a National Migration Week campaign. They're instituting a postcard campaign that calls on Congress to provide a path to citizenship for the undocumented, to preserve family unity as a cornerstone of the immigration system, and to provide a legal path for low-skilled workers to come and work in the United States. This marks the 10th anniversary of a pastoral letter by the Mexican and U.S. bishops urging comprehensive immigration reform in the U.S. And the bishops of Illinois have stepped into the gay marriage debate as the state's lame duck legislature took up the issue this week. Writing on behalf of his brother bishops, Chicago's Cardinal Archbishop Francis George said same-sex marriage laws create, quote, a legal fiction. He wrote that the state has no power to create something that nature itself tells us is impossible. The cardinal urged Chicago parishioners to contact their representatives to defeat the legislation. Illinois Senate Republicans on Wednesday and Thursday blocked the measure from getting a full vote. Gay marriage proponents said they will try again next week before the legislature takes office. And the Ordinariate of Our Lady of Walsingham in England formally welcomed 11 Anglican nuns into the church on New Year's Day. The sisters were part of the community of St. Mary the Virgin in Wantage, Oxfordshire. The group and the 12th sister, who became Catholic in 2011, range in age from 45 to 83. And it includes the Mother Superior of the community. What would a community be without a Mother Superior? They'll be known as the Sisters of the Blessed Virgin Mary. Over the Christmas holiday, we saw the passing of former Supreme Court nominee and Catholic convert Robert Bork. Judge Bork passed away on December 19th in Virginia from heart failure. He was 85 years old. His nomination to the High Court by President Ronald Reagan was one of the most contentious appointments in political memory. So personal and defamatory were his confirmation hearings that his name became a verb in the political lexicon. From then on, whenever a nominee was personally attacked and defeated, it was said that he had been borked. But Judge Bork took it all in stride. A former atheist, Bork became a Catholic in 2003 at the age of 76. He always attributed his conversion to the influence of his beloved wife, Mary Ellen. Judge Bork was a tireless champion of the sanctity of life and a vocal critic of the '73 Roe v. Wade decision, which legalized abortion in the U.S. In 1996, he wrote the best-selling and prescient Slouching Toward Gomorrah, Modern Liberalism and American Decline. I interviewed Robert Bork on more than one occasion. Here's an excerpt of our most recent conversation at his home in Virginia in 2009. At one point, our talk turned to the looming threats to religious freedom.
So I think we're coming to a head-on clash between religion and a secular religion, which is pushing this idea that nobody should. It's an attempt to destroy the end of traditional values in this country. They have a fierce partisan view, secular view, but held with a religious passion that makes them despise traditionalists and the kinds of virtues we've always thought were important. And I think they're determined to stamp them out with laws like that.
Do you think we're headed down a more slippery path and that religion will become further marginalized through the upcoming decisions and the legislative acts of this upcoming administration?
Yeah, I think they're going to try to marginalize it. And I think we've already seen bad results from the success they've had in attacking religion, and it's going to get worse.
Upon the culture, upon your long career as a judge, as a law professor, what imprint do you hope to leave upon the judiciary and those to come after you?
I think it would be immodest to have an ambition of that sort. I hope some of the ideas I've floated take root, and in fact they have. There are many more. There were practically no originalists in constitutional teaching prior to the 70s, and I started it, and it's come back. And now there's a struggle between the originalists and the freehanders. But aside from giving an impetus to a few ideas here and there, I have no idea of a legacy.
May Judge Robert Bork rest in peace. Up next, Congressman Tim HUELSKAMP is here to talk about the fiscal cliff and the deal struck by Congress and the White House to avoid it. The World Over Live continues in a moment. Stay right there.
Once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome back to The World Over Live. The so-called fiscal cliff was averted this week following a deal struck between the White House and Congress. What exactly does this deal entail? How will it affect you? And what can we expect from the 113th Congress, which was sworn in this week? Joining me on set is the Congressman from the 1st District of Kansas, Representative Tim HUELSKAMP. Congressman, thanks for being here.
Hey, my pleasure.
Now, I need to back up for a moment and talk about what's happened to you personally. You were removed from the Budget Committee, the Agriculture Committee, and you've said in public that this was a vindictive act of the leadership. Why are they targeting you? Why remove you from those committees?
Well, one thing that that folks need to know, the decision was made behind closed doors, and we can speculate, but we believe there was a scorecard, and if you voted conservatively, in my case voted my conscience and voted my constituents, we were punished. And I think we're punished as well for speaking up, but I tell you, I didn't come up here to take orders from anybody other than my constituents, and so myself and 3 others were removed from committees.
Now, today you were one of 9 who voted against John Boehner for Speaker of the House. Why vote against him?
Well, we had a lot of pressure put on us and a lot of intimidation, but at the end of the day, I'm worried about the direction not only of our country.
What do you mean when you hear intimidation? I mean, look, I covered the Congress years ago.
Yeah.
They deny you. I mean, I imagine what you're talking about is
I still
we're not
get to
gonna
keep
give
my
you,
office.
Okay. Oh, yeah, because they can demote you to a little closet in the basement.
So far, but committee losses for other folks.
Money for potential campaigns
absolutely,
upcoming from the
because
Republican.
they control a lot of money, and those kind of things are happening. I know one of the new freshmen was warned that if you vote for someone else, you will lose the committee assignment that was just announced yesterday. We'll see what happens. It's those kind of things they use to intimidate and to twist arms.
Tell me about this fiscal cliff deal. I mean, this was hailed by all parties. The media is saying, wonderful bargain. Look, both sides came together and they achieved something. Your own leadership and Senator McConnell in your own party would say there was a fiscal cliff about to happen. Everybody's taxes were about to go up. We stopped that. What is wrong with that analysis?
Well, at the end of the day, what happened is they raised taxes on 77% of American households. In particular, what bothers me the most, it raises taxes on successful small businesses. We're trying to get the economy going again. Raising taxes on folks that are creating jobs, that's the last thing we need to do. But in addition to raising taxes, it increased spending and did nothing about the fundamental problems we have, out of control spending, particularly on entitlements. We ignored that, and then it was full of all types of special interest handouts.
400,000 people making 400,000 or less will not be touched by these taxes, but anyone 400,000 and above, they'll see an increase in their percentage. But the deductions also will be reduced for people making significantly less than that.
Yeah, and that increase, 400,000 above, will go to almost 1 million small businesses, pay taxes in that level. In addition, for millions, about 77% of American households are going to pay more on their payroll taxes.
But the payroll tax, that's contributing to the Social Security fund, right? I mean, that should be solvent. I mean, if people want to take out later, they should pay in now, yes?
Yeah, I agree. I agree. But when we say taxes aren't going up on anybody but the rich, that's
a
not
misnomer.
True. But at the end of the day, the deal did not solve the problem. The problem is spending. It's not a solution. It was a deal.
And you had 3 minutes to read this bill before you voted on it.
We might have had 3 hours in the House. The Senate had 3 minutes. But at the end of the day, most of the senators voted for it as well. But in the House, even though the Speaker pushed it, a solid, overwhelmingly 2/3 of Republicans said no. This is not what Republicans are about. We're supposed to be about conservative policies.
When you
and went the
peel
wrong direction.
back the bill, Congressman, and you see $76 million in special interest tax set-asides for GE, for Captain Morgan Rum, for Hollywood. Hollywood gets to write off the first, whatever it is, $7 million, over $15 million of their film budgets if they shoot in the United States. Why these sweetheart deals? How did they get into this plan?
Well, that's always the question, how they got in here. They got in there because they hired lobbyists, and they got a Senate committee to put these in months ago, and the last minute they were shoved into the bill, and all these senators voted for it. But $430 million for Hollywood handouts, when just last few weeks we've been talking about the Newtown issue and how Hollywood violence contributes to violent society, a violent culture, and then we give them a handout.
Let's talk for a moment about a defense reauthorization bill. This is to fund the military. The president just signed this. It went through the House. When it was still in committee, you attached an amendment to that piece of legislation, and it protected the conscience rights of chaplains in the military. Why was that necessary, and who were you writing that for?
Well, with the implementation or the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, opening it up the entire military, chaplains and other servicemen and women felt their conscience would be violated because they would be forced to either preach things they don't like or to be quiet and silent in acquiescence to certain lifestyles. And we heard from pastors all over the country said, hey, we're being told you can't preach on certain portions of Scripture. And so we put something in there to protect not only pastors, but servicemen and women, that they have a freedom of conscience. We send them around the world to protect the rights of people in numerous other countries. They should have those same rights fully protected at home. So we're happy and pleased that was in the bill.
Congressman HUELSKAMP, I want to talk about the next Congress, this 113th Congress that was just sworn in. One of the things we keep hearing about is that the Republican Party, after the shellacking they took in the last election, is stepping back from these social issues, abortion, gay marriage, the things that are inflammatory issues, and some say led to the losses in the last election cycle. Is that your perception? Is that what you're seeing on the Hill?
That is definitely the perception, and that is absolutely what I'm seeing on the Hill. We're being told, Raymond, that please be quiet about these issues. Let's not talk about issues of life and family and marriage. When the court took up the DOMA case, not a soul in Washington said anything on our side. I was actually the only.
DOMA is the Defense of Marriage Act, which the current administration considers unconstitutional, and they simply haven't mounted any defense of it in court. But in his defense, we should say, Speaker Boehner was the one who said, wait a minute, Congress will defend this law because it is something that we passed, President Clinton signed, and the Defense of Marriage Act should be defended by whoever the administration
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the administration refuses to defend it, and the House has stepped up. Just this week, we adopted a rule. We will continue to defend marriage and the Defense of Marriage Act in the court. So that was a positive thing.
Okay, so they are, I mean, they are stepping up. I mean, $2 million have already been set aside, and Paul Clement is arguing it here in the Supreme Court, right?
Absolutely, yep. And that's a good sign. HHS mandate, though, quiet, silence. We haven't mentioned the issue of Planned Parenthood funding for months. Hopefully that'll come up this spring. And I will say I think it contributed to the defeat of Republicans because we did speak out about issues of life and family and marriage, issues of the heart.
Where is the HHS mandate now in the Congress? Is it anywhere? Is anyone aware of it? I mean, we see these legal battles in our next segment. We'll be talking about it, playing out across the country. What do you hear in the halls of Congress?
Well, we had a bill introduced that would protect the rights of employers and employees and individuals from the violation of their conscience. That didn't go anywhere. It actually didn't come to a vote in the House. The leadership chose not to bring that up to a vote. But that issue of conscience rights is very important. The bill will be introduced. I'm confident of that. Will it go anywhere in the Senate? I don't know, but we have the votes passed in the House if they bring it to the floor.
Let's talk for a moment about the February showdown. We just averted this one, but the truth of the matter is this was just a temporary Band-Aid. And though taxes go up, there's been no spending cuts. It really doesn't address the debt crisis. The president has already staked out a position and said, listen, I'm not having a debate about cutting spending. This is not the time to do that, but people have to pay their fair share, and those upper income earners may even have to pay more taxes. The GOP claims, or some claim, they will have leverage because of the raising of the debt ceiling. Debt ceiling is going to be maxed out in February. It will have to be raised or the government will default. Do they have any leverage?
I believe we do, but it depends what kind of spines we have in Congress. Are we willing to stand up to the president and say, hey, it's our constitutional duty to approve all spending and raising the debt ceiling. If you want to raise the debt ceiling and have authority to spend more money, you're going to have to settle for some spending cuts. Will we actually use our lever? I hope. But again, if we are not able to control spending by February, we've lost control for the next 2 years.
And you really believe you have leverage?
We definitely do have leverage if we're willing to use it. But the last time we had leverage, 17 months ago, Raymond, we didn't use it. And we created the current fiscal cliff crisis.
But this fiscal cliff, the resolution of the fiscal cliff tells me, politically speaking, the GOP has little leverage. And when they're pushed into a corner via the bully pulpit and the public impression that you're shutting down government, you're limiting options, and you're hurting good people, they quickly back off. So, and considering the losses, I'm not so sure the GOP has leverage.
Well, they have leverage where they're willing to use it. And there is a distinction there, and that's why I said, hey, we needed some new leadership to be able to use the lever, because when we're borrowing $3 to $4 billion every day, and we're sitting quietly, at the end of the day, we just can't continue to run up these debts.
Let's talk for a moment. There's a bill pending. We heard many representatives, Peter King, the governor of New Jersey, Chris Christie, caterwauling the other day because Speaker Boehner decided not to bring up a piece of legislation, a $60 billion relief package for Hurricane Sandy victims. This was portrayed far and wide as a callous act. Your thoughts? Have you looked at what's in the package?
We have not been provided the bill yet. We might be voting on it yet this week, but it involves a lot more things than what happened because of Sandy. We also believe, last I've heard, that FEMA still has tens of millions of dollars cash on hand. This is not necessary today. It's not necessary tomorrow. I mean, we need to be able to help those folks, but it seems to be it's unnecessary right now, but we don't have the full details.
Well, some of the details that we've come in possession of, this is in the Senate bill that you all will be considering. $336 million for Amtrak, $15 million for NASA, $20 million for nationwide water resources priority study, $125 million to the Department of Agriculture for emergency watershed protection. I love this one. $12.9 billion for unspecified future disasters. This bill may qualify, I'm afraid. And then you've got this one, the $9 billion to repair the roofs here at the Smithsonian in Washington. I didn't realize Hurricane Sandy's reach touched all the way in Washington, D.C. What do you do about these poor projects added to a bill like that? Can you pull them out in the House?
We can. That's why we don't know the final bill in the House. We can vote for it. But from what I understand, though, that apparently some votes have been traded for leadership in exchange for the bill. But we just passed a bill through the House. They passed a bill that increased spending $56 billion, increased, not decreased, and now they want to run another $60 billion spending increase. When somebody tells you in Washington, we've cut all the fat out, you've just given some very limited examples of how much waste is in government.
The president this week had signed an executive order raising the pay for congresspeople and federal employees. Now, I thought there was a move that I thought Congress limited its pay back in March. But this executive order would raise it. What do you do?
Well, actually, we passed a bill through the House that would stop that pay raise, but nothing can be increased until March. And I'm guaranteed the House will not let the pay raise go through. But one thing I want to note is raising, this is going to cost billions of dollars to raise it for all federal employees. But federal employees actually, every year they're on, they actually get a pay raise. So there are actually pay raises still going on. The president says we need even more pay raises. When we're bankrupt as a country, where we're borrowing 41 cents out of every dollar, by executive order, they said we're going to spend another $12 billion this year.
The audience heard it during the headline segment. The bishops of the United States, as they have been for decades now, are encouraging a comprehensive immigration reform package. The president, just yesterday, signed an executive order that would allow relatives of U.S. citizens who are here without documentation to remain in the country and apply for citizenship. Your thoughts on that and a looming immigration reform package?
Well, I think in the next few months, at least the next 3 to 4 to 5 to 6 months, it's all about fiscal issues, whether we're going to save this country or plunging into a fiscal abyss of this debt ceiling crisis. But after that, immigration might come up, but that's a prudential judgment of elected folks. But what I've seen coming out of this administration is a desire to go beyond the authority granted him by Congress, and has done that with a number of executive orders, usually around election time, and this one as well. And Congress is going to look at that. We're very troubled. I'm very troubled personally about the executive orders coming out on this issue and many others.
What do you do vis-a-vis immigrants? I mean, you have 20 million people here. Their families are in the country, whether they're documented or undocumented. In many cases, at least 20 million, they're undocumented. Yeah. What do you do? The bishops is saying you need to put family unity as a priority. Newt Gingrich talked about that during the election. Is there some middle ground for the Republican Party and the Democratic Party to strike on this issue that acknowledges that but still protects the sovereignty and the borders of the country?
Well, I think it's very clear in our social teaching that Nations have a right to protect their borders, and that was the agreement 20 years ago when they had amnesty. And it says after that we're going to actually deal with border security. That never happened, but the issue of family unity is one that matters, but there are so many aspects of this. But I've been very worried that it's going to be politicized and used for gaining votes rather than dealing with the fundamental issue. I mean, there's some very hard situations. If you were a child brought here by your parents and you weren't of age, I mean, that's one situation. But folks that are coming on their own volition across the border, breaking our laws and refusing to follow our laws, I mean, that's another situation. Again, it's time to distinguish and decide how we handle different groups of people rather than a general amnesty.
Very good. Congressman Tim HUELSKAMP,
Raymond,
thank you so much for being here. It's a pleasure. When we return, the HHS, the General Counsel for the General Counsel for the Becket Fund, Kyle Duncan, will be here to talk about the HHS mandate and the continuing legal battle. See, I can rewrite that prompter right on the fly. The World Over Live continues in a moment. Stay right there.
Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome back to the World Over Live. There are still over 40 cases and over 110 individuals representing hospitals, universities, businesses, and schools suing the federal government over this HHS mandate. All these plaintiffs claim their religious liberty rights are being violated. What is the state of these cases? And what are we to make of a few recent developments in the last few weeks? Here to bring us the latest news on the battle for religious liberty vis-a-vis the HHS mandate is General Counsel for the Becket Fund, Kyle Duncan. Kyle, great to have you back on the show. Now, over the break, the case you're representing, the Hobby Lobby case, went to the Supreme Court. You were asking for an injunction from the Supreme Court. Sonia Sotomayor read it, and she said the company did not satisfy the legal requirements to grant an injunction. How damaging was that ruling from the justice?
What Hobby Lobby was asking for was an extraordinary remedy. What it was saying was the appellate process is going forward right now in Denver in the 10th Circuit.
Okay.
But in order to avoid this overhang of penalties that would be accumulating during the legal process, we asked the Supreme Court to issue an injunction pending appeal. Now, that's an extraordinary thing. We believed and still believe the case deserved it. But what Justice Sotomayor simply said is that the court would not get involved at this time. That's what she meant by injunction. She meant an extraordinary ruling from the Supreme Court before the case actually made its way up through the normal procedures to the Supreme Court. So we don't feel it's damaging. We believe elsewhere in her order, she says that Hobby Lobby can go through the normal appellate process in the 10th Circuit and can then represent the case to the Supreme Court, which may well occur depending upon how they lower courts
But in the
rule.
meantime, these fines are, if you read the letter of the HHS mandate, which started on January 1st, the fines are accruing not only for Hobby Lobby, but for any company, right?
There are many companies that find themselves in difficult positions. By our count, the business plaintiffs in these cases are actually winning 10-3, however. So 10 of the businesses that have filed suit have received injunctive relief. 3 of them have not, which is unfortunate. But what you're seeing here is actually an increasing number of courts that are recognizing that business owners do have claims of religious liberty, and we find that encouraging, and that's going to be one of the main points we take to the 10th Circuit and say, you know, the judge below in the 10th Circuit is actually part of a growing minority or a shrinking minority of judges who find that religious business owners have no rights whatsoever. So the tide is actually turning in favor of religious businesses.
Before I talk about some of these other cases that have broken in recent days,
Right.
just to put this in some context,
Sure.
Religious organizations defined by the government as those who only hire from their own religion and only serve their own religion,
Right.
those groups are exempted, correct? The HHS mandate doesn't kick in for them to buy their employees contraceptives, abortifacient, sterilization services until August, right? Or is it already in place?
So an organization that the government considers a religious employer is completely exempt.
They're
from the
completely
mandate.
exempt.
They're completely exempt. Now, I have yet to meet one of those organizations because the exemption is so narrow that it's difficult to imagine. I mean, keep in mind, the Archdiocese of Washington, D.C. is suing. That's not considered a religious employer. The University of Notre Dame is suing. That's not considered a religious employer. EWTN is not considered a religious employer. So this exemption is extraordinarily narrow. That's the only class of individuals the government has said, you don't have to worry about the mandate. It is a vanishingly small number of groups, but that's the only one the government has actually taken the burden.
So the fact is you have a lot of religious organizations, hospitals, schools run by archdioceses, the Little Sisters of the Poor who care for the indigent poor. These groups are not exempted under this created exemption.
Not at all. At most, what they have is a temporary reprieve until August of 2013, which is what you mentioned. This is the so-called safe harbor.
But for any individual with a conscience who feels he or she doesn't want to be funding abortifacients, sterilization services, or contraceptives for their employees, they're in tough luck.
They're in a difficult position. The government has turned a completely blind eye to those organizations. Those organizations, as far as religion goes, are invisible to the government, which is why they're suing.
Let's talk about Tom Monahan's case. He owns Domino Farms, which is a huge office complex in Ann Arbor.
That's right.
He was granted an injunction by the court, as was a Mennonite-owned business.
That's correct.
What does that tell us? And in those rulings, what do you see that might cast a favorable light in your other cases?
What those rulings tell us is that some courts do get it. That when a religious person goes into business, say to found an office park or a lumber company, and they don't shed their religion with their articles of incorporation, these courts are seeing, well, these people still have rights. These people still have a claim that they can make, and they're recognizing. I mean, the court, the order you point to in the Domino Farms case, explicitly said, look, Tom Monahan founded this office park. He has certain religious values, and he's exercising them. By the way, he sets up the office park. It has a bookstore, it has a chapel, there's mass, there's values. Now, compare that reasoning with, say, the Hobby Lobby judge. That judge said, well, sure, the Green family has religious values, great, but they have a company over here, and that's separate from them. So anything done to the company, well, that doesn't affect their consciences, contrary to everything they say, everything they do, and everything they've always done with that company. So what you're seeing here is a stark divergence. And when you have those fundamental disagreements, well, eventually the Supreme Court will step in and make sure that we have one single answer. And you have the ingredients for that. With the Hobby Lobby application, Justice Sotomayor, all that meant is that she felt, and that's her own opinion, she felt it was too early for the Supreme Court to get involved.
Because it didn't go to any of the other justices. It just went to Sotomayor.
It did not. She could have referred it to the other justices. She chose not to.
Okay, I want to talk about the Wheaton and the Belmont Abbey cases. These are two colleges, one Catholic, one Protestant,
That's right.
who are suing on the same grounds, that it violates their religious liberty. The D.C. Circuit Court said what?
The D.C. Circuit gave us a very hopeful sign, because the lower courts in those cases, just like Notre Dame recently,
Threw the cases out.
threw the cases out of court and said, you're on your own. All you have to depend on is the goodwill of the government, who down the road may fix this. So what the D.C. Circuit said after, I must say, one of the most spirited oral arguments I've ever participated in, 65 minutes of rollicking oral arguments, the D.C. Circuit 3 days later reinstated the cases and said, not only do these cases belong in federal court, so there's jurisdiction over these cases, but we're going to hold the government to the promises it's making. We're going to demand status reports every 60 days from the government to show us whether or not it's following through on this promise to fix the mandate, to accommodate these organizations. And then we'll see what happens. So this is encouraging. There's a huge difference to our clients, to Wheaton and Belmont Abbey, between being thrown out of court one day and then being under the supervision of a court the next day.
Well, in many of the media accounts, Notre Dame was just thrown out of court.
They were.
In its decision.
They were.
Are you concerned about that and the way in which they were thrown out and what was said in that?
Well, I did read that decision today. That decision just simply goes the other way from the Belmont Abbey and Wheaton cases. That decision says...
But that's a circuit court decision as well,
That is a lower court
Lower
decision.
court.
So presumably, Becket Fund doesn't represent Notre Dame. Presumably, there'll be an appeal. Notre Dame, as far as we can tell, is in the same position position as Wheaton and Belmont Abbey. We're disappointed to see the court dismissing, which is exactly what the D.C. Circuit didn't do. The D.C. Circuit kept those cases and wants to hold the government to its promises, and we'd like to see a similar result.
There is a group, K&L Contractors. This is a Catholic-owned business.
Right.
They were, the Seventh Circuit Court, I believe, said that they can get an injunction under the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, which is a piece of legislation that the Congress passed.
That's right.
What light might that shed, and what support might that give to the other cases you're arguing? It's the first time I've seen that act cited.
That's right. Well, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, or RFRA, as we call it in the legal...
Sounds like something Scooby-Doo would say.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. I haven't heard that before. So this is an extremely important federal law. It was a bipartisan law. It was sponsored by Senator Kennedy. It was signed by President Clinton. Everyone supported this law. Now it is the centerpiece of these challenges because it imposes an extremely high standard on the federal government when the federal government burdens religious liberty. And so this decision that you referred to from the Seventh Circuit, this is an extremely encouraging decision because it's correct. It relies on RFRA, and what it does is it says the way that the 10th Circuit dealt with Hobby Lobby, the way that the lower court dealt with Hobby Lobby in the 10th Circuit is wrong. So there's already, even before we get to the sort of main event of these appeals, there's already a disagreement among the circuit courts. And this is encouraging, and it also sets the stage for eventual Supreme Court review.
You will never say RFRA without thinking of Scooby-Doo from now on.
I won't. I may never say it again.
And you can thank me for that. I'm sorry.
I will thank you.
Now, we've had the 8th Circuit, the 7th Circuit, the 10th Circuit, just to clarify. They've already weighed in. These are federal circuit courts.
And the 6th, that's
and
right.
the 6th,
Yes.
so 4.
So 4 already.
Okay.
That's right.
And what is the math here?
They're 2-2.
Okay. Now,
They're 2-2.
So it's got to go to the Supreme Court when you have that kind of conflict.
One would think so. Now, just to be clear, those rulings are sort of preliminary rulings. They're really significant preliminary rulings. I mean, the 10th Circuit and the 7th Circuit have both bothered to issue written rulings, which is really unusual. Now we'll have main events in those cases, to use a boxing analogy. So we'll duke it out over the spring and into the early summer, and then we'll see what decisions shake out. Many judges have considered these issues already. They've gone in all sorts of different directions. It's likely that we'll see that continue. And so we'll have the makings of a really good, what the lawyers call a circuit split.
Aren't you concerned that this has gone and is going to the Supreme Court to figure out, that all of this rests upon the court of last resort to unravel something as elementary as whether an individual can exercise their religious principles in the workplace?
Well, look, the last time the Supreme Court considered a Religious Freedom Restoration Act case, the church won unanimously. The last time the Supreme Court considered a free exercise case, which is the Hosanna Tabor case that Becket Fund handled, the church won unanimously. We don't know if the religious plaintiffs will win unanimously in the Supreme Court, but we have strong reason to believe that there are many justices who are deeply concerned, even Justice Ginsburg, in the individual mandate decision, went out of her way to say, you know, a command to buy a product, if it violates some other part of the Constitution, such as the Free Exercise Clause, would be unconstitutional. Now, that wasn't at issue in the individual mandate case, but that will be at issue when these cases get to the Supreme Court. So we're confident.
But if you read Justice Sotomayor's ruling, one would think that she's probably going to go in the other direction against you.
We'll hopefully have the opportunity to convince her otherwise.
Isn't that noble of you? Kyle Duncan, thanks for being here.
Thank you very much.
And you can follow Kyle's work at the Becket Fund for Religious Liberty. You can visit them at becketfund.org. When we return, who do you think were the most influential Catholics of the past year? I'll tell you what I think when The World Over Live continues. Stay right there. Thanks again.
Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome back to The World Over Live. As this is the first show of the new year for us, I thought we should recall the most influential Catholics of 2012. Now, several names came to mind, and many of you offered your own suggestions on Facebook and Twitter. They ran the gambit from Pope Benedict to Father Robert Barron to Bill Donahue to Mother Angelica. So like Solomon, it falls to me to make the final decision. I decided there should be two categories for the most influential Catholics of 2012, clergy and laity. Individuals who left a lasting impression on the year and had a real impact on Catholics and all people. Now, among the clergy, there were several possibilities, but I finally decided that a cardinal and an archbishop were the standouts. The first man not only raised awareness about the threat to religious liberty in the U.S., but he managed to unify all the bishops of the United States around a single message, a practical miracle. He also often became their winsome voice. This prelate prayed at both the Republican and Democratic conventions, and though I know some criticized the dinner he hosted in his archdiocese featuring both President Obama and GOP nominee Mitt Romney, Cardinal Timothy Dolan was surely one of the most influential Catholics of 2012.
Right now, I could tell you the only thing we're certainly prepared to do is not give in, not violate our consciences, and not obey what we consider to be something immoral. You probably would not be surprised that we took a bit of a breather as we waited for Election Day, because the results of Election Day could have changed the playing field. It didn't. So now I think the bishops have taken a deep breath and said, we better get back to work and decide just what we're going to do. Now, one of the things we got to do, Jerry, is we're not in this by ourselves. So I think a lot of bishops now are getting realistic and say, I better begin to talk to my peoples in charity. We have already, but I mean to really get down to business with my people in charity, with my people in healthcare, with my people in education, to see how we are going to be unwaveringly faithful to our principles, but to see what options are open to us to try to continue. But I would say no door is closed except the door to capitulation.
Not to be forgotten is Archbishop William Lori of Baltimore. His ad hoc committee on religious freedom boldly articulated the church's opposition to the government's HHS mandate. He championed the fortnight for freedom and continues to be the American point man on religious liberty.
It is not for the government, to define the identity and mission of any religion or religious organizations. If religious freedom means anything, it means our own right to our God-given right to say who we are and what our ministries are.
Now we move to the lay side of the most influential Catholics of 2012 for their ubiquity throughout the last year, their willingness to speak about their faith, licitly or otherwise. I've chosen two men who battled it out for the office of Vice President. In many ways, they represent the divide within the Catholic community. Vice President Joseph Biden and Representative Paul Ryan. I'll leave it to the bishops and you to determine who was the more convincing Catholic.
My religion defines who I am, and I've been a practicing Catholic my whole life, and it has particularly informed my social doctrine. Catholic social doctrine talks about taking care of those who can't take care of themselves, people who need help. With regard to abortion, I accept my Church's position on abortion as what we call de fide doctrine. Life begins at conception. That's the Church's judgment. I accept it in my personal life. But I refuse to impose it on equally devout Christians and Muslims and Jews. And I just refuse to impose that on others, unlike my friend here, the Congressman.
I don't see how a person can separate their public life from their private life or from their faith. Our faith informs us in everything we do. My faith informs me about how to take care of the vulnerable, about how to make sure that people have a chance in life. Now, you want to ask basically why I'm pro-life? It's not simply because of my Catholic faith. That's a factor, of course. But it's also because of reason and science.
Well, those are my choices for the most influential Catholics of 2012. Do you agree or disagree? I'd love to hear from you. Keep your comments civil. Go to my Facebook and Twitter pages and sound off. Both are accessible at RaymondArroyo.com. The links are on the left-hand side of the screen. Now, let me share our New Year's resolution with you. In the new year, we're going to expand and deepen what we've been doing on the world over. We plan to be bringing you more of the in-depth reporting you've come to expect without clutter or ideology, expanded cultural reportage, including film and live events and things that you can feel good about bringing your family to and taking part in yourself. And we'll bring you more of the exclusive interviews with the people you thought you knew. I also want to bring you vibrant examples of people living their faith in diverse circumstances, stories that I know will inspire and hopefully uplift you. I think at times the focus on the politics drowns out the other stories that we need to hear and share. We'll also be featuring debates this year about the issues you care about, issues that people of goodwill can disagree about, and they do. So get ready for an exciting year, and let me know what you want to see more of. You can reach me and make sure you sign up for our e-blast at RaymondArroyo.com, where I will preview upcoming World Over guests and features each week. So our e-blast does that, and you don't want to miss that. Don't miss a moment of where we're planning to take you in the new year. The show continues on Facebook and Twitter. Until next time, we'll be scouting the world over for all that is seen and unseen. On behalf of the staff and crew of EWTN News, I'm Raymond Arroyo. We'll see you next time. Bye now.